Exposed, my daughter-in-law's incredible betrayal left me homeless, a touching journey to recovery. Eleanor's hands trembled as she stared at the freshly signed documents. The mortgage papers that once secured her beloved home now lay in the grasp of Sarah, her ambitious daughter-in-law. Months of careful savings and hard work faded as she learned that her own son, Mark, was leveraging their family legacy on an ill-fated startup. What had once been a haven, filled with memories of laughter, love, and long cozy evenings spent drawing the curtains against the cold, was now slipping away into a shadowy chasm of betrayal. Betrayal had a way of twisting itself deep and dark. It sucked the warmth from her veins and left her feeling cold, empty, and utterly alone. Just hours ago, Eleanor had trusted Sarah, who painted a vivid picture of success, one where Eleanor's careful sacrifices would finally yield a return. Instead, now, her family, a family she had nurtured every step of the way, was a mere mirage in a land of broken trust. With every cautious step she took from that office, the weight of shame and utter disbelief crumpled her spirit. In an instant, Eleanor felt the ground beneath her life buckle. She pawed through her memories, desperately searching for a time when trust had diluted into this murky nonsense, only to find each recollection slashing at her heart, an unforgiving reminder of broken promises. Weeks turned into days spent in denial, drifting around the town she once called home. Faces she knew merely brushed past her now, too busy carrying their own burdens to notice the ghost drifting among them. The local cafe, where she'd served lattes with a smile, felt foreign, the inside now a strange world that no longer recognized her as their beloved pharmacist. And as the chill of October seeped through the wooden limbs of the trees, so too did Eleanor feel the haunting grip of impending homelessness. Her mind raced with shame, weighing the heart-rending collapse of her family as she struggled to make sense of an empty life without a home. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Eleanor trudged through the vibrant autumn leaves, their crisp crunch accentuated by her heavy heart, a glimpse of color caught her eye. A weathered brochure fluttered against a lamppost, promising it would rekindle the artist within. The community college painting class resurrected long-dormant dreams she thought dead. Whimsy danced around her, pacifying the torment of despair. Could she really find solace in creativity again? With conflicting emotions bombarding her, Eleanor hesitated, feeling like a reckless child attempting to climb a sundered tree. A flicker of resolve pushed her forward. She signed up, molding anxiety into cautious hope. In the classroom, the air was thick with paint and resolve. Eleanor met Mr. Thompson, a patient guide who seemed to see beyond the scars etched in her contours. Yet, as she dipped her brush into colors both foreign and familiar, Eleanor wrestled with immense guilt. Would she even allow herself to embrace the world unfolding through her art while that dark betrayal lingered? Each stroke felt like a battle between her past fidelity and a precarious future, as Sarah's shadow loomed larger with each day, reminding her of what had been taken, every inch of joy stripped away by betrayal. The canvases displayed both her anguish and her determination, yet a storm gathered inside her, ready to break at any moment. Just as she began to realize her new identity, Eleanor felt Sarah's tightening grip around her name, threatening to undercut her fragile creativity. Would she sink back into despair or let the paint whisper her truths to a world that only demanded smiles? Staring at her empty canvas, the future suddenly felt oppressive. A churning tide of choices loomed ahead, waiting for her next move in this uncertain journey. Eleanor stood before the canvas, her heart pounding as if trying to break free from the stronghold of her past. In those moments, the blank surface loomed larger than life, reflecting fragmentary thoughts of loss intermingling with half-formed aspirations. The classroom buzzed around her classmates deep in conversation, laughter rippling across previously desolate halls. And yet, Eleanor remained tethered to her silent struggle. This was her battleground, and she was choosing to fight. With a determined exhale, she dipped her brush into a vibrant cerulean blue. The color engulfed her, dissolving the monochromatic landscape of grief that had clouded her spirit. The stroke released a burgeoning sense of control, a defiance against the whirlwind of betrayal spinning inside her. As the paint spread across the canvas, she began to breathe, her heart beat in rhythm with the movement of her brush, her hands finding a delicate balance between chaos and creation. Hours collapsed into vivid swaths of colors, abstract images dancing upon her canvas. Mr. Thompson circled the room, providing gentle guidance. His presence was a beacon of encouragement. "Art is a dialogue," he said softly as he paused beside her, peering closely at what she had created. "It's not just on the canvas, it's a conversation between past and future. Let it tell your story." Eleanor followed his advice, surrendering to the brush in her hand. She poured hurt and fear onto the canvas, imprinting snippets of memories long buried, unraveled trust, warmth of family dinners, the stark contrast of emptiness that now enveloped her existence. Each brushstroke reinforced her autonomy, whispering, "This is your reclaiming." And then it occurred to her, through the act of creation, she was not simply an artist but becoming Eleanor again. She was shedding an old skin, one worn by inadequacy and betrayal, to welcome a more resilient self. As the painting began to take form, so too did Eleanor's identity. The hues intertwined, creating landscapes of emotional complexity that intrigued and challenged her. Little by little, the turmoil transformed into an expression she could own, an artifact capturing a journey rather than just a loss. But just as determination surged, so did doubt. Each passing moment, Eleanor felt Sarah's specter, a ghost of grievances past, whispering harsh reminders. What if Sarah had been right all along? What if her art, her hopes, crumbled under the very weight of her own dreams? Would this newfound courage last, or would it, too, seep back into the darkness? This looming confrontation pressed heavily upon her. Did she have the strength to not only redefine herself, but to ultimately confront the betrayal that had severed her life? As the image on her canvas emerged, an idea sparked a reckoning that required action. Perhaps it was time to face the very person who had encapsulated her pain, to force Sarah's reckoning with her choices. Tomorrow, she thought, her heart racing all over again, I will talk to Mark about confronting Sarah. The tension danced in the air, heavy with the weight of emotional stakes. No longer would she allow the betrayal to dictate her narrative, she was ready to reclaim the chapter she had thought lost. Yet, as Eleanor squared her shoulders, a nagging sensation surfaced. What would that confrontation reveal within her? Would unearthing the truth break her, or would it allow her to rise? In unleashing her voice, could she finally harness the power to heal? The canvas shimmered, reflecting the vibrant spirit Eleanor had begun to rediscover. But the moment of truth rested at the horizon, a delicate balance between vulnerability and vindication. Taking a deep breath, she whispered to the canvas, thanking it for revealing her. Tomorrow awaited, ripe with uncertainty and potential. Had she finally found her footing, or was this merely the beginning of something more tumultuous? Eleanor's heart raced as she approached the cafe where Mark was waiting, her palms slick with a blend of anticipation and fear. The air felt suffocating, thick with the weight of what was to come. Each step echoed not just her resolve but also the myriad voices clashing within her. What if she stumbled? What if she, confronting Sarah, uncovered more secrets left to fester in the dark? She spotted Mark seated at a corner table, a warm smile breaking upon his face as he waved her over. His presence was a balm, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone in this endeavor. Yet, as they exchanged pleasantries, Eleanor felt the storm swirling inside her, rage and pain contorting into a visceral apprehension. Just talking about confronting Sarah made her stomach twist. "What's on your mind?" Mark's voice shook her from her internal spiral, eyes probing gently. Eleanor realized she had to articulate her thoughts, no more internalizing, no more hiding beneath layers of hurt. "I want to confront Sarah," she blurted out, her voice trembling but resolute. The moment hung in the air like a thread, taut and fragile. Mark leaned back, assessing her with a mix of concern and admiration. "Are you sure about this?" he asked carefully. "You know she can be confrontational. It may reignite feelings you've been trying to suppress." Eleanor nodded, the truth echoing like a brittle echo sliding into place. Mark was right, venturing down this path could dig up the very darkness she had been working to shed. But wasn't this the crucible she needed to forge a true identity from the ashes of her past? The resolve built in her like a tide, a fierce will to not only reclaim her narrative but claim her truth. "I have to do it," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "If I don't confront her, I'll never escape this weight." Mark offered a reassuring nod, but his eyes radiated an empathy that both comforted and unnerved her. "Then let us plan it. How do you envision this conversation going?" Eleanor's mind spun, reeling with possibilities. Could she muster the courage to speak her truth without succumbing to confrontation? This wasn't about seeking revenge, it was about liberation, not just from Sarah, but from her own doubts. Every agonizing piece of her life had prepared her for this moment. She would not approach Sarah with anger but with a stern assertion of her autonomy. The dialogue would be about setting boundaries, revealing her truths, and establishing her identity afresh. She pictured Sarah's face blissfully unaware or brazenly dismissive and felt a surge of indignation. "I want to yell," Eleanor articulated, the thought being liberating in its own right. "I'll speak my truth. I deserve that much." Mark leaned closer, his presence grounding her in the reality of the forthcoming battle. "Remember, Eleanor, speaking your truth is an act of self-love. You may face a wall, but embracing your narrative will break it down." Her determination swelled as the reality of her plan anchored itself in her mind. Mark's encouragement shifted her focus away from anxieties. Suddenly, she was no longer paralyzed by fear. Instead, she was overwhelmed by the stark clarity of her choice. "Tomorrow, I'll confront her," Eleanor announced, newfound conviction pouring into her voice. The declaration warmed her heart, illuminating the dark crevices that Sarah's betrayal once occupied. They finished their drinks and spoke about lighter topics, although Eleanor's mind danced in a whirlwind of thoughts. How would Sarah react? Would she see Eleanor as a threat or merely dismiss her? The cacophony of potential outcomes stirred a mixture of dread and excitement. As the evening dimmed and they departed the cafe, Eleanor's heart beat in rhythm with newfound hope. Yet, beneath the surface, the anticipation of confrontation loomed like an unlit match waiting for a spark. What awaited her in the face of that inevitable reckoning? Would she emerge victorious, or was there an unexpected twist waiting to send her spiraling once more? The answers hung tantalizingly within reach, just out of grasp, as tomorrow awaited with uncompromising certainty. Eleanor woke the next morning with the sun casting a golden hue across her bedroom. The light seemed almost ethereal, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that spiraled within her. Today was pivotal, and as she lay there, she could feel the layers of anticipation transforming into a palpable intensity. This was her moment, the confrontation that could redefine her life. She rose, moving through the motions of her morning routine like an automaton. Each brushstroke against her hair served as a reminder to gather her resolve, while the splash of cool water against her face awakened the clarity she needed. The stakes were high, she understood that. Facing Sarah not only meant confronting the woman who had hurt her but also confronting the facade she had lived behind. Would she even recognize herself after this? Dressed in a simple yet powerful outfit, Eleanor chose her favorite blouse, confident it projected strength while reflecting her newfound commitment to authenticity. Staring into the mirror, she whispered to herself, "You deserve this." The words felt strange but empowering, and as she repeated them, a flicker of courage ignited within her. Her reflection, however, was haunted by doubt. What if Sarah flipped the narrative? What if she crafted a story that cast Eleanor in an unfavorable light? The possibilities pressed against her mind like a vice, each potential outcome a brick weighing her down. Yet, just as quickly as the fear clawed at her, another voice whispered that she had come too far to retreat. The cafe buzzed with activity as she arrived, a seas of chatter and warmth. She spotted Mark at their usual table, the reassuring anchor in her stormy sea of doubts. But as he met her gaze, she noticed something new in his eyes: trust. It gave her a jolt of confidence as she approached him. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. Eleanor nodded, even as her heart galloped in her chest. "It's today, isn't it?" The question hung between them, as if to test the gravity of what lay ahead. "Remember our plan," Mark replied, his eyes locking onto hers with piercing intensity. "Focus on your narrative. Own it. You are not her victim, you are a survivor. As they moved toward the exit, Eleanor's legs felt heavy, as though walking toward her own execution. Yet with each step, she mentally chanted her mantra: this was not about revenge, but emancipation from her own silence. The streets outside felt alive, vibrant with the hum of life. But all Eleanor could focus on was the impending confrontation. As they neared Sarah's apartment, coldness settled in her belly. Moments slipped through her fingers before she knew it, but she had to remind herself that this was the moment of truth she had long awaited. Arriving at Sarah's doorstep, Eleanor paused, inhaling deeply. The familiar scent of leather and pine from the surroundings filled her nostrils, yet it was overlaid with the acrid tang of dread. "Just breathe, Ele," Mark murmured, resting a hand on her shoulder as she formulated her thoughts. "Remember, it's about expressing your boundaries. Speak your truth." She nodded, eyes fixed firmly on the door. It felt like an immovable barrier, yet served as a gateway to an altered reality. No longer would she be tethered to the memories of betrayal. This was her reclamation. As Eleanor lifted her hand to knock, a sliver of doubt crept in. But the thought ignited a protective fire: she would be heard. Just as her knuckles rapped against the door, the weight of all the unexpressed emotions churned within her, threatening to bubble over. A voice from the other side resounded, and her heart plummeted. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and all her carefully assembled thoughts became a cacophony of need, desperation, and unwavering resolve. Would she find the strength to leap across the chasm of her hesitation, or would she drown in the tidal wave of her fears? As the door creaked open, Eleanor's future loomed uncertainly before her, begging for blood, sweat, and truth to be spilled. What's next? Would this confrontation break the cycle, or entrap her further? The door opened slowly, revealing Sarah, her expression unreadable. Eleanor's heart raced, each pulse echoing like a war drum. She was struck by the flood of memories that ebbed back into her consciousness: sudden flashes of laughter shared, moments of vulnerability exchanged, but cloaked now in the shadow of betrayal. Eleanor took a steadying breath, reminding herself of her purpose. "Eleanor. I didn't expect to see you." Sarah's voice was a mixture of surprise and feigned indifference. "I didn't expect to be here either," Eleanor admitted, her voice steadying into a calm cadence she hadn't anticipated. This was her moment. "But I need to talk to you." As they stood in the threshold, Eleanor fought the urge to retreat. With Mark's encouragement vibrant in her mind, she stepped over the threshold, allowing herself to be enveloped by the familiar tension of the space. Memories threatened to suffocate her, but she pushed through. No longer would she shrink under the weight of anxiety. Once inside, Sarah gestured to a chair. As Eleanor sat, she felt an unexpected surge of agency. She was no longer the spectator but the architect of the conversation. "Eleanor, you don't look well," Sarah commented, calculating and almost condescending. "What's this really about?" It took every ounce of strength not to react, to retain her dignity amidst the emotional chaos. "I'm tired of pretending everything is okay. I'm tired of feeling small." Each word was a brushstroke unveiling her truth. Sarah crossed her arms defensively, confusion dancing on her features, which only fanned the flames of Eleanor's determination. "What do you want me to say?" "I made my choices, you've made yours." Eleanor leaned forward, her heart thumping in her chest, but feeling the fire of resolution burn ever brighter. "I want you to acknowledge what you did. You hurt people. You hurt me. This isn't about assigning blame, it's about understanding the impact of our actions." For a heartbeat, silence reigned thick and heavy. Sarah's eyes shifted, darting as if grappling with the implications of Eleanor's words. There it was, the tiniest crack in her facade, but Eleanor knew better than to be swayed by uncertainty. "I trusted you, and that trust was shattered," Eleanor continued, her voice rising gently in passion. "But I won't let your actions define me any longer. I refuse to be your victim." The revelation of her own strength washed over Eleanor, transforming the shame that had previously clung to her into a resilience she had yet to fully embrace. Her heart swelled with the realization that confronting Sarah was not simply about seeking closure, it was about asserting her worth. "Are you saying this to hurt me?" Sarah asked, her tone defensive again, yet there was a strange flicker of vulnerability beneath it. "No," Eleanor replied firmly, the pep in her voice unwavering. "I'm saying it to free us both. I don't need your acceptance to move on, but I need to express this." With each word, Eleanor felt more liberated, unearthing a hidden competence she'd buried beneath years of doubt. As Eleanor stood to leave, a sense of accomplishment bloomed within her. Confrontation had not been the spectacle of chaos she'd envisioned, but rather a nuanced exchange of truths. Stepping back into the world outside, she felt the weight of expectations lift, if only slightly, as she looked back at Sarah. Clarity emerged. Eleanor was no longer just a woman betrayed, but an individual steadfast in her journey towards self-discovery. Yet, as she strolled away, a hesitant thought emerged. Could Sarah's reaction reveal more unspoken weight in their history? What would it ignite within her now to truly step into this new realm of freedom and self-confidence? Am I truly ready for what comes next? Eleanor walked away from Sarah's house, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows that mirrored the distance she felt from her old self. Deep breaths filled her lungs, each one a reminder of her newfound strength. This was a pivotal moment, one she hadn't anticipated when she first decided to confront the painful chapters of her past. With her mind ablaze, thoughts fluttered like moths to a flame. The confrontation had been galvanizing, but commitment to her development now beckoned. What did she truly want moving forward? How would this experience shape her goals, her philosophies? She navigated the city streets, grounding herself in the present, resisting thoughts about the complexity of her relationship with Sarah. Mark's encouraging words resonated in her mind. "Embrace your authenticity, Eleanor. It's your most powerful tool." She could feel the truth behind those words, the weight of their significance deepening with each step. Determined not to timidly sidestep her aspirations, she resolved to push further into unfamiliar territories. That evening, Eleanor ventured to a local community workshop on assertive communication. It felt daring, electrifying. Until she took that first step, she hadn't realized just how much she needed to express herself without fear or the crippling doubts that she had nurtured far longer than she'd ever acknowledged. The workshop was vibrant, filled with individuals eager to refine their communication skills, to assert themselves in interactions just like she had done with Sarah. Eleanor took a seat at the back, fading into the comfort of anonymity. But as the facilitator spoke, she felt her pulse quicken. The energy in the room ignited an introspection she hadn't anticipated, a growing awareness of her own voice. "Think of a time when silence felt like betrayal," the facilitator urged, inviting participants to share their experiences. Eleanor's heart raced at the notion, but a seed of bravery burgeoned within her. This was her chance to translate her feelings into decisive action. Breathing deeply, she raised her hand. "I've spent so much time silencing myself out of fear of rejection, of conflict," she began, her voice trembling initially but gathering strength with every word. "When I finally stood up to someone who had disrespected me, it felt like stepping into the light for the first time. I realized that silence had kept me shackled for too long." A murmur of understanding coursed through the group, supportive nods that spoke louder than words. This wasn't merely a workshop, it was a movement, a collective crafting of newfound courage. After the session, Eleanor lingered, paying attention to conversations that unfolded. She gathered insights, tips, and stories about the ongoing journeys of others. With every story shared, she found morsels of her own experience reflected back at her, reassuring her that she wasn't isolated in her struggle. As the night progressed, Eleanor understood that the work was only beginning. While confronting Sarah had marked a significant step, it was this continuous engagement with her own voice that fortified her progressing resilience. She recognized that her fear of confrontation was less about the perceived fallout and more about her own capacity to affirm her desires and needs. Driving home later, Eleanor envisioned the life she aspired to build, a life imbued with authenticity, resilience, and the strength to advocate for herself and others. But what further challenges awaited? Would this newfound journey into assertiveness succeed in fostering an enduring change in her relationships? Questions thrummed in her mind as she arrived home. Could she truly recalibrate not only how she viewed herself but also how others saw her? Tomorrow would test the limits of her redefined self. The next morning greeted Eleanor with a sense of renewed purpose. Sunlight streamed through her kitchen window as she poured herself a cup of coffee, invigorating liquid that mirrored her aspiration to rise. She had made a commitment to herself to dismantle the barriers that had long constricted her identity. Today, that intention would manifest significantly. With a firm grip on her mug, she glanced at her reflection in the glossy surface. The slight crease of uncertainty around her eyes began to fade. As she readied herself for work, her thoughts flitted back to the workshop, to the courage she had discovered within a room full of strangers. It served as a reminder, eloquence was as much about speaking as it was about listening, not just to others, but importantly, to herself. At the office, her mind danced with the idea of integrating her learning into her daily interactions. She recalled a time when a colleague had dismissed her suggestions in a team meeting, simmering resentment simmering beneath the surface. Today, she would address similar behavior head-on. Would she transform indignation into assertiveness, or would the old patterns entrap her? Her first test emerged when Greg, her supervisor, declared a last-minute meeting. As he discussed the new project initiatives, Eleanor felt an overwhelming urge to contribute her insights. The chatter around her shifted her focus, but she steadied herself. Taking a deep breath, she waited until he paused. "I have some thoughts on how we can improve our workflow metrics," she asserted, her heart pounding yet resolute. Greg's brow furrowed slightly, but the flicker of surprise energized her. She continued, articulating her ideas clearly. With each word, she felt her previous hesitation melting away, replaced by a palpable sense of agency. When the meeting concluded, Greg approached her, an uncharacteristic hint of admiration crossing his face. "Good input, Eleanor. I hadn't considered those angles," he remarked, his tone unexpectedly validating. The flutter in her stomach transformed into exhilaration. She had not only expressed herself, but she had also impacted her coworkers' perceptions of her capabilities. Emboldened, Eleanor approached her desk, her mind racing with the possibilities this new assertiveness could bring. She sought a further challenge, one that tested her resolve. The annual team retreat was approaching, and while everyone else was eagerly awaiting presentations and workshops, Eleanor felt an inner nagging. A glance at the notice board revealed a call for proposals for team-building activities. She'd always wanted to lead a session focusing on effective communication, but fear of rejection had silenced her ambition. Would today's experience give her the courage to put her ideas forward? After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor found herself clicking on the submission form. The words flowed easily from her, fueled by her recent triumphs. She not only proposed the activity, she infused it with her own experiences, her growth, and her transformative journey. Submitting her proposal felt like stepping off a cliff, thrilling and terrifying. What if it was dismissed? What if no one resonated with her vision? Yet, she knew she had to fight against that internal narrative. This was not just about being seen, but about actively participating and asserting her passions. As she stepped away from her computer, Eleanor's heart raced. She had ignited a spark within herself, one that she could no longer ignore. The reality of her assertiveness brought up questions she needed to confront. Would this newfound strength surface in other areas of her life, or would old habits continue to resurface? Her mind fixated on the possibilities ahead. Unfolding new layers of herself, would this assertion transform her relationships with friends, family, and even Sarah? The stakes felt significant in uncharted territory that demanded deep introspection and bold eventualities. Just then, her phone chimed with a notification. It was a message from Sarah, asking for a conversation. A swell of apprehension washed over her, mingling seamlessly with her determination. Would she be able to engage with her, not as the woman who walked away from confrontation, but as someone who demanded respect and clarity? With her heart pounding and questions spiraling, Eleanor understood the fragile crossroads at which she stood. The moment had arrived for her to embody this new version of herself. Her past was poised to collide decisively with her future, and the outcome was hanging in the balance. Would she be prepared to face the next chapter of her journey head-on? Eleanor's fingers trembled as she read Sarah's message again, feeling the uncertainty morph into a tight knot in her stomach. Memories of strained conversations flooded her mind. Every time Sarah had challenged her, Eleanor had retreated, cloaked in submission. What outcome awaited her now if she chose defiance instead? Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders. This was not just a family dispute that could be smoothed over with avoidance. It was a moment to showcase her growth, to assert her boundaries, and demand the respect she had long neglected. As she considered her response, clarity replaced trepidation. "Let us meet at the cafe after work," she typed, her fingers steady now. Eleanor pressed send, feeling a surge of determination. This was her choice, a shift from passive to participative, from invisible to visible. Throughout the day, she found her mind wandering back to that pivotal moment when she had expressed her ideas in the meeting. It had been a breakthrough, but she couldn't allow that single victory to settle into complacency. What if Sarah's call for a conversation could be another springboard for change? What if she could even turn this familial relationship into a profound connection, rather than one nestled in discord? The clock ticked slowly toward the end of the day, each second intensifying the anticipation swirling within her. The cafe loomed in her mind, warm, inviting, but now tinged with apprehension. As she stepped into the familiar space, the smell of caramel and roasted coffee beans was a comfort she desperately needed. She spotted Sarah at a corner table, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. "Hi," Eleanor greeted, sliding into the chair opposite her. Sarah, dressed impeccably, looked poised yet somewhat defensive. Eleanor swallowed hard, the weight of unspoken issues heavy between them. "Thanks for coming," Sarah said softly, her gaze flickering to the table. "I wasn't sure if you would." Eleanor took a breath, focusing on the calm she needed to embody. "I almost didn't. But I thought we needed to talk. Really talk." A moment of silence lingered as Sarah looked at her, surprise flickering across her face. "You sound serious." "It's because I am," Eleanor replied, feeling the gravity of her own words. "There's been so much tension between us, and I want to understand it. I want us to communicate better." As they engaged in conversation, Eleanor consciously threaded her newfound assertiveness into every response. When Sarah recounted events that led to their conflicts, Eleanor felt her initial impulse to defend herself bubble up, yet she held back, listening carefully. An epiphany dawned: this interaction wasn't merely about defending her stance, it was about bridging the gaps between them. "You didn't listen to my perspective," Sarah admitted one point, eyes flashing, her voice a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "Because I didn't fully express my own," Eleanor countered, leaning in slightly. "I hid from confrontation, and in doing so, I shut down our ability to communicate. I want that to change." The conversation ebbed and flowed, raw emotions intermingling with revelations. Eleanor's ability to speak her mind seemed to inspire Sarah, who gradually set aside her defensiveness. Each unearthing of vulnerability led Eleanor closer to her daughter-in-law, creating pathways toward understanding that had previously felt barred. As they reached a tentative truce, Eleanor recognized a simmering opportunity beyond this conversation. Not all feelings had been resolved, but she felt ignited by her willingness to be honest and bold. She had tapped into a well of emotional strength, unearthing layers of confidence she had long thought buried. When they finally parted ways, Eleanor glanced back at the cafe, the dim light spilling through the windows, casting warmth onto the pavement. She realized she had not merely confronted Sarah, she had confronted herself. But questions bubbled within her mind. Would she display the same courage in confronting others in her life? What happens when she faced challenges that did not afford her the same opportunity for candid dialogue? As she walked away, her spirit buoyed by progress, her phone buzzed again. It was Greg, asking if they could discuss her proposed team-building activity further. The opportunity to embody her transformation loomed larger. Now, she had to decide how to approach this new challenge, embracing her assertive self in a different context. Would this be another defining moment, or would her newfound boldness falter? The stakes felt higher now than ever, and Eleanor faced a crossroads once more, realization dawning that her journey was just beginning. Eleanor stared at the screen, her resolve mingling with unease. Greg's request reverberated in her thoughts, merging with the all-too-recent conversation with Sarah. How could she transform her assertiveness not just in personal encounters but also in a professional setting? The last time she had suggested a team-building activity, it had barely registered. But this felt different. This was an opportunity to redefine her impact, to ensure her voice echoed in the workplace. As she entered the office the next morning, she carried a sense of purpose she hadn't previously known. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating spaces crowded with colleagues. Eleanor took a moment to breathe deeply. She could do this. "Hey, Eleanor. You ready for the meeting?" Marissa called from across the open plan. Marissa was bubbly yet full of her own insecurities, often drowning them out with chatter. "Yeah, just gathering my thoughts," Eleanor replied, pulling her shoulders back and straightening herself out. Marissa noticed something new in energy, a shift in demeanor. They entered the conference room where the atmosphere was already palpable with anticipation. Greg was reviewing the feedback from the last activity, and Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that she'd need to speak out more courageously this time. As they sat down, Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest. What if her voice was drowned out again? She cast a glance at Greg, who appeared distracted, flipping through notes. Today was different, she reminded herself. The meeting unfolded as discussions evolved from anecdotes of past events to brainstorming future activities. Each suggestion bounced around the table. Some were met with enthusiasm, others with silence. Eleanor's mind buzzed, her previous breakthroughs flickering to the forefront. When Greg asked for feedback on the proposed activities, Eleanor found her moment. "I have an idea," she began, her voice steady but not yet commanding. She continued, elaborating on a team-building exercise that emphasized collaboration, trust, and open communication. The words tumbled out naturally, interspersed with her hopes for fostering a more cohesive team dynamic. To her astonishment, Greg half turned to plaster on a smile, but it was thin. There were no nods or affirmations. Instead, he diverted to another teammate's suggestion, as if her input had fallen into the void. A surge of heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. Hadn't she just declared her assertiveness? Yet the familiar pang of self-doubt crept in. "Actually, Greg," she said, interrupting her own thoughts and surprising herself. "I'd really like us to consider my idea." The words hung in the air, bold and unrelenting. His eyebrows shot up momentarily, and a ripple of curiosity flickered across the table. "You really feel strongly about this," Greg replied, his tone shifting into a professional curiosity that hadn't been present earlier. "I do. I believe it could bring our team closer," she asserted, her heart racing but her resolve clear. A few heads nodded around the table, giving her strength. As they discussed her idea, Eleanor felt those sharp edges of vulnerability soften slightly. Still, in the recesses of her mind, lingering thoughts from her conversation with Sarah pricked her conscience. Speaking out in this professional environment was exhilarating, but it also exposed a deeper fear. What if asserting herself pushed others away? What if she inadvertently alienated her colleagues with her newfound confidence? As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor walked away feeling a strange amalgam of triumph and apprehension. Just as she reached her desk, Greg approached her, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. "I actually think your idea has merit. Let us discuss it one-on-one soon." A smile broke through Eleanor's uncertainty, but her thoughts ensnared her again. Would Greg's endorsement translate into real change, or would the old patterns of dismissal return? That question hung like an unfinished thought as she sat at her desk, the steady hum of the office around her. Taking a deep breath, she realized issuing her voice hadn't mirrored an end to doubts. It had instead opened a myriad of new possibilities and challenges. And as she navigated these emerging questions, another message pinged on her phone, this time from a different colleague. "Can we chat about the project this afternoon? I think we need to address some things." Eleanor blinked at the screen. What were those things? One thing remained certain: the journey of growth had just taken another turn, spinning her into an ever-evolving realm of self-discovery and confrontation. Would she rise to the next challenge, or could her newfound assertiveness falter at the hands of unyielding circumstances? Eleanor awoke the next morning still glowing from the challenge she had tackled. The echoes of yesterday's conversation with Greg reverberated warmly in her heart. Today felt promising. Her self-assertiveness was beginning to take root in her professional life, reshaping the way she approached her work environment. Gone were the days of waiting for others to speak. Eleanor had embraced the truth of her voice and was ready to uphold it. After a quick breakfast, she donned her favorite blazer, a vibrant shade of blue that matched her boldness, and left her apartment. As she walked to the office, she firmly set her intention to engage fully in today's conversations and meetings, no matter how daunting they felt. When Eleanor arrived, the office buzzed with energy. She was greeted by Marissa, who approached eagerly. "Are you ready for the discussion about the project?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Eleanor could sense Marissa's nerves. A rare moment of solidarity washed over her. This was a chance to support a colleague while asserting her own perspective. "Absolutely," Eleanor replied, her tone filled with resolved confidence. "Let us make sure our voices are heard in that meeting." The meeting that followed was pivotal. Team members, energized by the prospect of upcoming projects, began sharing ideas and feedback. This time, however, Eleanor was prepared. When Greg asked for input on her earlier team-building proposal, she not only reiterated her thoughts but integrated constructive feedback from her colleagues with grace. She felt poised. Hers was a conversation, not a monologue, and the bonds forming around shared insights allowed her confidence to flourish. Later in the discussion, a colleague, Lucy, hesitated, looking nervous. Inwardly, Eleanor tapped into her newfound assertiveness, sensing an opportunity. "Lucy, I recall you had some thoughts about this. I'd love to hear your perspective." Here was Eleanor, not only advocating for herself but creating space for others to share their insights. When Lucy spoke up, her ideas brought a fresh angle to the proposal. Just like that, Eleanor witnessed a ripple effect of empowerment, a moment blossoming in front of her. As they knotted their ideas together, she realized that authenticity didn't just elevate herself, it multiplied in every interaction, forging a stronger team dynamic. When the meeting wrapped up, Eleanor felt the exhilaration of accomplishment filling her soul. This was a moment of significance. She had claimed her space within the team. Suddenly, she heard Greg call her name. "Eleanor, could we talk for a minute?" With an affirmative nod, she approached him, her pulse steady. "Sure, what's up?" "Your proposal and your assertiveness in today's discussions were impressive. I'd like you to lead that team-building activity," he stated, his tone appreciative. Eleanor's heart leaped. This was recognition, an opportunity not just to assert her identity but to lead. "Yes, of course. I would love to lead it," she replied, barely containing her enthusiasm. Eleanor spent the afternoon brainstorming ideas and curating an agenda for the session. She envisioned a space filled with laughter, exchange, and vulnerability. She wanted to inspire others to connect meaningfully with one another. The familiar stirrings of creativity, fused with her assertive voice, felt like a potent combination. As she left the office that day, she reflected on her transformation. Eleanor was no longer the woman who cowered in the face of confrontation. She was an architect of her narrative, a wielder of her fate, emboldened by a renewed sense of self and ready to face challenges ahead, whether with Sarah, Mark, or those in her professional sphere. Returning home, she sat down with a sketchpad, eager to capture all her ideas for the upcoming team-building event. Each stroke of her pencil felt liberating, as though she was solidifying her peppering visions at work. But in her heart, she knew that this was not just about leading an event, it was about fostering an environment where authenticity thrived. Days turned to weeks, and eventually, the team-building activity launched. Eleanor stood before her colleagues, her heart racing with excitement. As she facilitated, she saw them open up and share their stories, their vulnerabilities. The experience transformed her notion of leadership. It was not simply about directing others but cultivating a space for collaboration. As the evening wound down and Eleanor received heartfelt thank yous, she felt tears brimming in her eyes. Bolstered by appreciation, it hit her she had not just changed her environment, she had transformed her experience of belonging, reclaiming a space that had once felt uneasy and unfamiliar. This was her final realization: Eleanor had stepped into her power and nurtured others' potentials. She felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a confidence now firmly rooted in her being. Through authenticity, leadership, and vulnerability, she had sculpted a new identity. It was more than survival, it was living fully, revitalized by her choices. Eleanor smiled as she reflected on her journey, a journey of redemption and empowerment. True fulfillment awaited, and she stepped confidently into this new chapter, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Now, I urge you to reflect on your own journey. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these uplifting narratives reach those who need them. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Eleanor's transformation, and what you hope to see next. And finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of this support.